Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video of Ethan's Code Guild, and today we got quite an exciting subject. So today we're going to do a little bit of mastering loops in Java. I have prepared quite a few things for all of you guys today. We've got a PowerPoint presentation, I've got quite a few examples as well. I'm going to try to do more of the PowerPoint based presentations for a bit of structure in the video. Really good to get some feedback from you guys as to whether or not you like it. If you're new here and you haven't visited the channel before, my name's Ethan and we discuss all things code, giving some tips and tricks, and documenting some of my own projects and my own developer journey. Now, I am a relatively new developer, there's no shame in that at all, but I am certainly aspiring to be a fantastic one, and hopefully in the future, thanks to guidance from people who are already in that role, I might be able to get there. Now, for those of you just starting, this is going to be quite a simple video. This teaches you some very basic tips and tricks you can use in your own code, but it is also a really good guide on loops because they are very much used in really most projects, to be fair, and they have a lot of functionality that they can provide your project, which we'll go through today. So how is this video going to look, and what are we going to be covering today? Well, we've got a few things we're going to be covering. We've got a for loop, a while loop, a do while loop. We're going to talk about breaking and continuing, switch case loops, and then also advanced loops. Now, for those of you who are kind of completely new to Java, I would say it's worth getting a bit maybe of a basic grounding on Java, for example, variables, looking at data types, things like that. That'd be really good to have already in advance, but you don't necessarily need an awful lot in terms of Java experience because we're going to keep this quite simple, and it's not really going to be too complex. What we're going to do is we're going to start off with doing it in a couple of ways. So I'm going to go through concepts of each kind of loop, and then what I want to do afterwards is I'm going to go through some examples. Now, I prepared a document for you guys, and I've done a bit of coding last night, just to do some really simple loops, both in a practice scenario, and then also how you might want to apply that to a business scenario, so how you might want to apply that to your own project. But I'd obviously suggest you practice, really good thing to practice, maybe do your own, maybe think about how you could use it in your own projects, and it really is beneficial. First kind of loop is a for loop. Now, on a conceptual level, it's used primarily for when you know how many times you want it to repeat. So a loop, as it kind of sounds, goes around in a kind of circle, so to speak. And with a loop, you can have a certain action happen a certain amount of times, if you'd like. And that's what for loops are for. An example being is whilst, or for example, if I want to count from 0 to 5, and every time I get to the next number, I want to write down the number. So I get to 1, write down 1. Get to 2, write down 2, get to 3, write down 3, get to 4, write down 4. That's a really good example of a for loop because it is a what you're trying to do is you want to write down something or do something a certain amount of times. It's really good for counters and arrays. What I mean by counter is really similar to what I've already discussed when you are counting from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where you want it to run a set number of times. For example, if I want to add 2 5 times to 0, I would do 2, well 0 plus 2, that's 2, 2 plus 2, that's 4, 4 plus 2, that's 6, 6 plus 2, that's 8, 8 plus 2, that's 10. That's an example of a kind of how you can use it for counting. Arrays as well. So in Java, you got what we call arrays. Now, an array's best way to describe it is essentially kind of like a list of different data. Now, you might want to go through that list and go through each one. Instead of manually select the first one, then the second one, then the third one, having really messy code that's got a lot of lines, you can use a for loop to say, I want you to count from 0 to 10, every item in that array, and I want you to do this thing, whatever that might be. And we're going to go through a bit more what that looks like. It will make more sense, guys, when you see it, trust me. So, simple example. So what I'm going to do for you now is I'm going to show you what I've currently got for you guys. Now, this is an example of a simple for loop. This is a loop that, as I said, is used to iterate a certain amount of times. It's got a couple of things. It's got a start, a condition to stop, and a step. So in this example, and what I've shown you is a really simple loop for counting and writing down the number that I'm counting on, a bit like I described earlier. The condition, or the start point, is an integer which we've called I, and that's going to start off at 0. Okay. The condition is I cannot be less than 10. Sorry, I has to be less than 10. If I reaches 10 or more, then it breaks. That's the condition. The step is the progression, so to speak. That's the best way I can describe it. So in my case, we got I++. What does that mean? It means it'll iterate by 1 when the loop goes through each time. We'll see what that looks like in a minute. And then we've got quite a simple system out print statement there that just prints out whatever number we are currently on based on, see, the amount of times it goes up. An example for this, I can show you all, is going to be the following. It will be the following in just a little bit. Oh yeah, that's why. That was an error on my part. Please don't worry, guys. That is grand. There we go. So if we go and have a look, you can see the I is being counted and it adds on each time. So you can see in that one, we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Alright? These numbers here, that's irrelevant. That's to do with another example that I'll show you in a minute. But it's this that we're looking at specifically. You can see what it does is it starts off at 0, goes through the loop, it goes, 0 currently is less than 10, or I is less than 10. Therefore, I will print it out. Once it has been printed, it will then step and go up. Alright? And that's what you see there. Each time it's stepping and going up. Now you might want to ask, oh, what if I want to control how many it steps? Say, for example, I don't want to just go up by 1 each time. I want to go up further by 3 or 4. You can do that in the for loops. And that is shown in this example here. You've got the integer of I is 0, that's not changed. I has got to be less than 10, also not changed. And then you've got I plus the equivalent of 2. Now what that means is it will take whatever I is and it will add the equivalent of 2. In this case, every time it prints, it will go up and step by 2. And you can see that in the code just down here. You can see it goes from 0, 2, to 4, to 6, to 8. That's as simple as it is for loops. That's a simple way of doing it. Now, for the next example, you'll see we've got a real kind of, more of a business use example. And I'm going to show you what that looks like now. We've got the loops there. Just FYI, guys, I am commenting this out purely because it's going to be a lot easier to do this. There we go. Right. Here we go. Now this is a real example where you might use it in combination with other tools such as if-else statements. If you don't know what those are, guys, I would really encourage you to have a look. One good way you can have a look is if you go and look at videos on YouTube for if-else statements and walk you through it. They're not that complicated. You can see in this example what we've done is we've got the start part as 0, then we've got the condition, I has got to be less than 10, so we want it to loop up to 9 times, and then we got, or 10 times, sorry, and then we got I++. Alright. Now, we're using that to counter, but where we might be able to use it is on this, we're saying if, when you divide I by 2, the remainder is 0, then we're printing out it's an even number, plus whatever that number is. Or else, if the I divided by 2 equals 1, then it will print out odd number. Now that's an example of where we've essentially gone count, if this condition happens, do this. If this condition happens, do this. That's quite commonly used. One example in particular where I've used it for my to-do list at the minute, we have got a for loop that essentially goes through the kind of list of tasks, and it will search through those tasks to see whether a condition matches, and if a condition matches that scenario, then a certain bit of code will run. Alright? And that's how you can use it. I will say, guys, trying to think on your feet of real world examples is not the easiest, and I discovered this when I was planning this video. So what's next? It can also be used to erase. We've also gone through that, and I've got an example here. So we've got a list of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, And all we've done here, as you said, for I equals 0, so we've got once again our starting bit. And this time the condition is when I is less than numbers.length. So what does that mean? So what that's checking for is whether I, each time it iterates, is less than numbers.length, it will print out the number. If it is not, if I ends up being more than the length, it'll stop going through the loop. Alright, which also can be a really good tool. I'll show you that one. There we go. You can see that just there. So we got the even and odd numbers. Okay, we got that there. Even number 0, odd number 1, even number 2, odd number 3, even number 4, odd number 5, 6, 7, 8. That's an example of this one up here. Alright, for going through and checking if there's a remainder left. And then you got the same down here. It's just going through the list, okay, and it prints out every single number that we have there. Alright, you can change the number to make a difference. It will still have the same result. So if I want to put 400 in, and then I want to go for it, nothing will change. You can see there, it's just printing off each number in that list. That's a really, really good useful tool, guys. What it means for yourself is you can use things like that to ask it to go through your own list. So you might have a list of pets that you might have, and you might want to loop through each pet and get some information from it. You can use loops as a cleaner way of being able to loop through. Now, why does that look cleaner? I will show you because you're probably wondering. If you didn't use loops, you'd end up doing something like this, which is going to be really worth it at all. So, system out print line done. We want it to be numbers. Numbers.get. Oh no, I'm thinking of array list there. 1 or 0, and then you'd be copying that for each one. So you'd be going from that 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm not actually going to put the numbers in, but you can see how that is really a lot more repetitive and a lot less clean than that. That's 3 lines in total. Put it this way, that's it. 5. It's 5 lines. So that's a really good example to see how sometimes the loops can save you time and make it a lot easier for you. So with that being said, let's move on to our next kind of loop. While loop. Now while loops are very good. They run while a condition is true. However, the benefit of while loops versus the do loop, the for loops, is that they will be used to repeat when you don't know how many times you need it to repeat. So on our to do for loops, when I showed you those, we had the start, then we had the condition, then we had the iteration. Alright? While loops, what they essentially do is allow you to not have a start and not have a step, just have a condition, and you can use that condition to keep going until that condition is no longer true. Example being, if I get my code up for you, I'll be able to show you my examples for that. I've got quite good ones for that actually. There we go. Yeah, I wonder which one it was. Alright, there we go. So, this is our examples for the while loop. So in this example, we got while x equals 1. Sorry, we've got an integer, which is currently the result of, well, the sum of 1. Our condition is while x does not equal 5. So while x is not 5, this will run. And you can see it does a system out print there saying not yet 5. And then it will add the equivalent of 1. Now why is that good? For example, I might want x to be, let's say, let's go for 45. And we want to change that to 60, okay? Now if I do this, what you'll find will happen is, I can change whatever variable this is, this will still run the correct amount of times. So I could change this, for example, to be x equals 25. Now I haven't written down there how many it takes to get from 25 to 60, because I don't need to with the while loop. This will just run however many times it needs. Observe. See? Not yet 65, not yet 65, and it will just keep going. Now, I've not declared in that how many steps it does take, and that's really the benefit of while loops. They allow you to go through and have a condition set up that will run while it's not true, but you don't need to specify there are going to be this many steps. You're going to have to go through this loop this amount of time, well, these amount of times, which can be a bit difficult. Next one is another example where essentially what we've done is kind of a similar kind of thing, but I've done it as a different example. So in this case, we've done a numbers list, and we've got y equals 0. Okay. Now what will happen with this is it will go through and it will say while y is less than numbers length, it will go through and print out the numbers in that list and then add the equivalent of 1. Now why is that also useful? Once again, we don't need steps, so I can add more numbers in here at 7, 8, 9, 10, 10. And this will keep running until... Debug that back to 1 second. Ooh, there we go. 1 second, guys. There we go. And that will keep running until it's happy with it. It will go through, it will run, and it will make sure that it's happy that it's done that condition until it's false. Now, as I said, that's really good for when you're having just a condition and you don't quite know how many iterations you'll need. Now, I'll be honest, I don't necessarily majorly use while loops. I'd say they're probably the ones I use the least, to be honest. I'll be honest with you guys, I'd love to see if you can write down in the comments below if you're a software developer yourself and you've used them. Let me know what kind of scenarios you use them for, because as I said, I've not used them a major amount, but they are still a tool which is good to know, because you never know, you might encounter a situation where a while loop is the most appropriate. So that's something you can use. Next one that I've done here is another example of a while loop. This one is a little bit different. So what we've got here is we've got a random list of numbers, which is an empty array list. Then we've got a set of random numbers. And what we've done here is use the random class. Now this is a set of code kind of allows you to get random integers, pick random, things like that. That's not something I use very often, just use it in this example. All you need to know is that it will go through and get a random integer out of the random numbers dot size. So in our case, our random numbers are the size of 7. So yeah, our random numbers has a list size of 7. So it'll pick a next integer or a random integer out of 0 to 7, and you'll be able to use that. What it will do is it will use that to say, whilst our random list is less than 5, I want it to add a random number from our random numbers list. Now that's useful because I might want to change that to be 8. I might want to change that to be 9. However many times I want however big I want my random numbers list to be, however big I want my random list to be, the while loop will accommodate that and just keep running until that condition is no longer true. Which is a really useful tool, once again, guys. So, have a quick look, go through. There we go. So the next one, and I will show you this. I've already done the simple example. I've already done the real example, where a step ahead is a do while loop. Now this one, I'll be honest with you, is really quite similar to the normal while loop. The difference is it will always run at least once. Now that might be useful if you need it to run at least once, and then you want the condition to follow afterwards. Alright, so I'm going to show you what that looks like in a little minute. I would say it is good for menus or retry prompts, so we'll show you the examples, but it is a good thing to use for that. Once again, I don't use them a major amount, but I never count them out because it's still a skill that you can use. So for our do while loop examples, you can see we got integer of n equal to 1, and it will run at least once and check the condition afterwards. So it will do the following every time at least once. Print out what n is and iterate on n. So iterate on n at least once. And then while n is less than the equivalent to 5, you can ask it to do something else. Doesn't necessarily need to be any oh no, I'm sorry. And then what will happen is afterwards it checks the condition, and if the condition is true, then it will just carry on doing it, essentially, which is a useful tool. I got an example for you, which I designed earlier, which is quite a useful tool. It's more of a real world example of what you might use. So we've got on this one a menu system. Alright, now we're using scanner here. I don't want you to worry about what that is. All you need to know is it takes user input from the console. Essentially is what it is. Now, we've got an integer of choice here. So we will do the following. Print out, start game, exit, choose an option, and it will use the scanner to see whatever integer that we put in the terminal as our choice. And then if the choice does not equal 2, it will keep doing this. So an example being, I might decide, I'll show you. 1 second. Once again, this isn't one that I necessarily use a major amount, but it's still useful to know. So choose an option. So it might go 1, 1, 1, 3. See, it'll just keep doing that until it finishes, and that's it. Click 2. That's when it exits. Why does it exit? Because my choice was 2. So that condition is now no longer true. Therefore, the loop will stop. And that's a good tip for you guys to know. Alright. Next one is one that is used, really, I'd say in combination with loops. Now, these are really, really good tools for filtering out lists. They're really, really good for stopping the code under certain conditions if it finds something in particular that you want. And we'll go through what that looks like in just a minute. So, if I show you the slide here, you'll see we've got two things. We've got what we call, there we go. Got what we call break. Now that does pretty much exactly what it says. It just breaks the loop. So the loop will no longer already, it stops. And then we got continue. That skips the current iteration. Alright. Now I'm going to show you what that looks like, example-wise, because these are a useful, good thing to know. We've got some simple examples for us to look at today. Now these I do use quite a bit, because they're really good tools to use when conditions are met, when you no longer need all the code to carry on going. So I would say it's good to use them. Okay, 1 second. Right, so in this example, we've got a for loop, I equals 1, I less than 10, I plus plus. So same as we've already seen, we've got the start, we've got the condition, and we've got the step. How this works is when we hit 5, if we hit the equivalent to 5, I want the loop to stop working. I want it to break. Now you can see here, but our condition is if I equals less than 10. So what about 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10? That's the beauty of break and continue. For break, if I'm going through a list and there's something specific that I find and I want it to stop, I can ask it to break, which is a really useful tool. The next condition we got is if when we divide I by 2, it's the equivalent of 0, okay? We want it to continue, which in this case what we're saying is if it's an even number, skip it. So whilst this will technically run on that particular step, it won't display any results. It will just skip past it and go on to the next one. Now that's quite useful if, for example, you have a method where you might want to, what's an example? It's a good example for you. Good example for continues, good example for continues. Here we go. So if you're going through a list of PC parts which is what I had in one of my projects when I did a PC part. If you're going through that list, if, for example, you don't want to include any graphics cards in that list, you could use continue to say if the part name is graphics cards, continue. So it will skip over that and just carry on printing whatever's left. Now that's good when you have a list with variables or with objects that you do not want the loop to do anything with. You want the loop to ignore. That's a useful tip for you. Next example we got here, I will say as well, you've got the system out print. The reason that's there is it just means if, for example, it's less, well, it's equivalent to 5, it breaks. If it's less, if the division is 0, then it will skip and it won't print out whatever the number is. That's what that means. Next one is an example where you might use it in real life. So I didn't do a slide for that. That's fine. Right. Next one is an example where I might be used for searching. So in this case, we've got a list of names here, and we've got those arrays as lists. We've got Ethan, Jack, Sarah, Mia. We've got a string variable, which is what we're searching for. In our case, we're searching for Sarah. Now, what we've done here is we've gone through and used what we call an advanced loop, but we'll go through that in a little bit, and I will show you what that looks like. Actually, do you know what we'll do? No, we can leave it for now. No, we'll leave it for now, it's fine. We're using an advanced loop, and I'll show you what that looks like later on. But what you can see happens is if the name, when we search for it, for each name when we go through the list, if it's the same as what we're searching for, then it will print out found the name and then break. So the loop will no longer continue. If the name length is less than 3, so if these names aren't big enough, then we'll skip it entirely, and then it goes through and checks the name. That's an example of maybe a continue statement and a break, because we know that Sarah is more than 3 letters. If it's more than 3 letters, then we want to, if it's less than 3 letters, then we want to skip it, because it's not anywhere near that, and we'll print out the others. So that is a really good tool to help with you guys, and I would say certainly use it, because they are, as I said, more common. I use those more than I do most other loops. Next one, for the break and continue real example we've gone through, don't need to worry about that. The next one is going to be a switch case. Now these ones are a bit interesting, I'll be honest with you. Now they're interesting purely because you don't necessarily use them too often. However, what I would say is when you do use them, they are good. And I will just show you as well, just in case you're wondering. You can see on that one, for the first bit, where it skips even numbers and all that kind of stuff, goes 1, then it goes 3, but then after that, because it's then 5, it breaks. Same with the names in the list, it searches through, finds Ethan, finds Jack, finds Sarah, stops, and breaks the code. So that is just something for you guys to see. But switch case statements are quite useful. Now, as I said, I don't use them. I'll probably use switch case statements a fair bit. I wouldn't necessarily say massively. They're more useful when you've got, I'd say, multiple outcomes that a certain piece of data or a certain thing could be. So how do they work? I'm going to go through that in just a little bit. So they're used for kind of fixed options, so to speak. They're cleaner than multiple if-else statements. So you've got if-else statements, for example, to say if x equals 5, do this. If this condition is true, do this. Else if, do this. All that kind of stuff. It's just a bit of a cleaner way of being able to edit it, essentially. Now, as I said, not necessarily have to be used, but it's still a really good one to know. Got a couple of examples for you here, which I will show you. Got a simple example, which is just here, which, as you can see, what it takes essentially is a variable that we set up, option 2, and then it switches the response based on what the variable is, or what the scenario of the variable is. So in this case, we're switching what we do based on if the option is the same as case 1, case 2. In this case, we put 2. So if it's case 1, it prints out option 1 selected and breaks the code. In our case, it's case 2, so it prints that out, breaks the code. And the last one we've got is default. And then if it's default, it will just print out invalid option. Now, why does it do that? Well, these switch case statements are good at writing this instead of doing, for example, for your for loop, so your starter, your condition, and then your step, and then after that going if option equals 1, do this, if option equals 2, do this, else do this. And that just can look a little bit messy versus this, which is a little bit cleaner. So as I said, you can see if it's case 1, it goes through that route. If it's case 2, it goes through that route. If it's if it's nothing else and there's no other option, then you can use what's called default, which essentially means as standard, unless another case matches, do this. Now that can be useful if, for example, you're looking at what's a good example? There we go. If you're doing like a hangman game, for example, where you might have the guessed word, and you might be seeing if the guessed word is the same characters, same length of characters as the actual word, or if the word is less, the guessed word is less than the actual word length. You might want to do it if it's not a correct guess at all, so it's not the same length or anything else. So there's lots of different things you can do. As I said, hard to think of an example without kind of going back on my own project, but you do use it every so often. Just depends if it's something you'd like to do. The next stage is a real world example. So I'm going to show you what that looks like now. And then we'll go from there. Now the real world example I've done, pretty simple. All it essentially is, it's the same kind of thing, but in this case we're using a game as an example. So we got the state of the game, in this case it's pause, and then what it will do is it will switch what the following steps are based on if that state matches the following cases. In this case we've got 3 possible cases. We've got start, we've got pause, we've got end, and then we've got a default. If the state is start, then it will print out game starting and it will break, so it'll say don't go through the loop anymore. If it's pause, then it will break once it's printed out the game paused. Then if it's end, we've chosen the state, then it will print game over and it will break. And as default, if none of those are applicable, then we get unknown state. Now that's a really good useful tool. As I said, we're using the break because we don't want the loop to carry on going. So what we've done there is just to make sure that it doesn't carry on going, we've used break. That's something I do try to use quite often. Some people do say it's unnecessary. Break and continue are really good at just making sure your code doesn't start behaving in a way it shouldn't. So that's why I would certainly suggest, if using it is appropriate, to use it. That's it for the switch case statements. They're probably the easier ones. I would certainly say they're ones which do take a little bit of practice. They're not used too often. As I said, I don't necessarily use them a lot, but they are certainly things that you could use depending on the situation you're in. I would just say as well, a lot of these loops, guys, because I know a lot of people do ask about them, and just because you can use one doesn't mean that's the right loop to use. So dependent on the scenario, some loops just make more sense to use than others, and a lot of that comes down to your principles. So whether you're planning on expanding the code in the future, whether you think you're going to need to have more options available if you want to quickly add it in, and also what kind of data you're manipulating. I'd say keep that in mind, because as I said, it's important to keep that in mind. So the next stage for that one is what we call advanced loops. Now advanced loops are a lot cleaner and safer for iterating lists when you deal with Java, because Java is a strongly typed language and Java is an object-oriented language. What you'll find is most of the time with loops, you're not necessarily looping over plain data types. So you're not just looping over strings or integers or Boolean variables. Not necessarily doing that. Usually, you're iterating over data objects, lists of data objects, depending on what it might be. And I would say with that one as well, the benefit of advanced loops, you don't need an index. So a lot of the loops I've shown you, quite a few of them, to be fair, have had the start point and then the indentation. So it goes for each one. Now advanced loops allow you to kind of skip over that, provided all the data in the loop is what you're saying it is. And I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. We'll go through with, first of all, just a simple example. Now these are used a lot, particularly for a lot of my projects. The reason being is when I was doing my project, I'm doing a to-do list at the minute, when you're going through tasks, for example, and things like that, if you have the task object model and you know what's there, you might want to go through each one and then do something specific, so they can be quite useful for that. So, advanced loops. Let's have a look. So in this case, we're going to get a simple example of you're just printing out fruits in a basket. Alright. Now in this case, as I'll show you, you've got the array list, string, you've got fruits, and in that list of fruits is apple, banana and orange. Alright. Now how the for loops work, you need the data type of what each individual piece of data is, followed by the location. So in our case, we're saying go through each fruit. We know that each fruit is going to be a string data type where you see the fruits list, which is there. So then it will go through and you can use that so that on each iteration you'll be on a new fruit. And for each of those fruits, I want you to print out what the fruit is. Now that is really, really useful. And I will show you what that looks like on the code. You can see it. Now these I use a lot more. Now you can see it's printed out apple, banana and orange because it's essentially gone through, looked and saw, you've got on there a fruit, which is a string, in the fruits list. I'm going to print out what it is. Oh, there's another fruit, that's the next one in the fruits list. I'm going to print out what it is. And you can use that to help. As I said, the first argument for that is the individual data type, the individual piece of data, its type, then a variable name for that individual piece of data, followed by where it is located. In our case, it's the fruits list. Another real world example, which I'll go through for you, this is more of an example you might use in a game, is the example just here, where we've got an inventory. So we've got an inventory, once again all strings. I'm not going to do it with objects, so I think that's going to get a bit complicated. I will say the objects aren't any different. We're going through the objects, it's the same thing. If I've got a list of cars, each with their own kind of attributes like colour, wheel drive, type, whatever it might be, you can do the same thing. And it'll always be the same process. Type of data at the start, what you're going to name that individual piece of data, followed by where it's located. And you can manipulate it then for each one. In our case, it's going through each item in the list of the inventory. We know they're going to be string items, and it's going to be printing out those items. So once again, really good example of how you can use advanced loops to be able to just help, really, with going through things. And that's it. So in summary, we've gone through quite a few things. We've gone through 4 loops, known iterations. We've gone through while loops, when there's unknown iterations, we don't know how many times we need to go and go through the loop. We've gone through do while loops, so that always runs at least once, and we've gone through break and continue to count the flow of the loop, and we want it to stop, we want the loop to skip over an iteration. And we've also got the switch, which we've gone through, so switch case statements for clean branching, so going through and just understanding if a certain case matches, then it will run that case's code, followed by a for each loop, which is best known for collections. So what I mean by that is it goes through a list of objects or items, maybe with more than just a simple string, and you're able to use that to manipulate it a lot easier, and it's a lot cleaner too. That's it, guys. So that leads us on to what we're going to do in the next video. So the next video, we're going to try to go into collections a little bit more. It's a bit new to me, collections. I'd say new, not necessarily. I just don't necessarily use them very often, but it's a good skill to have. We'll also be going through lists, sets, and hash maps, when to use them what. The reason I really want to go through that is because that is important. Now that's important because without it, a lot of code would be really hard to write. so it makes it a lot easier having that. If you guys like the video, please do let me know down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you enjoyed the video. I hope that was very informative for you guys. I know it was a bit of a longer video, but as I said, loops are an important one to know. And if you can master them, you can practice them, it makes coding so much easier. Stops everything feeling so manual, slow, and it also makes it a bit more future-proof. It makes it easier to expand on. With that being the case, if you haven't already, I'd really encourage you to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Channel's doing quite well, to be fair, so I'm quite pleased. And if you can let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are, where you've used loops, where you think loops are beneficial in your own projects, in your own experience, and just share with the community, because that'd be really, really good. I would allow everyone to maybe learn something from other people, and also allow me to learn from you, which is even better. So I will see all of you guys soon, and I will see all of you guys in the next video. Take care, guys. Bye bye.